Welcome everybody to the World Forest Report. I'm Dean Bell here with Dean Kevin and Ronald Gust. Today I'll start with continuing the documentary I've been playing every week with Dane Wigington's documentary, The Dimming. I think we're into the fourth part here. But it talks about the chemtrails and how it's dumping, especially aluminum and barium nanodusts or dust particles on the soil, and that causes the fires to really go haywire there. If you've ever had a campfire and you throw barium or aluminum dust on the fire, it almost explodes. It just like incinerates. It's an incinerator. So that's what they're dumping on the trees, plants, soil, atmosphere from the chemtrails, particularly the aluminum and barium. So I'm going to continue with this documentary, and we can discuss it afterwards. If you have anything, we can talk about it.
You only are told what you need to know. And so they assume that most people don't need to know anything, and the rest to only know a little bit, except the people who are pulling the strings.
Many ask why environmental groups are not addressing the climate engineering issue. They appear to be more concerned about protecting their 501c3 nonprofit than they are about protecting the environment. Ignoring and obfuscating the truth about verifiable sources of damage to the environment is not protection. This is total betrayal. It's the same fraudulent behavior we see from every large corporation on the planet, towing the line for the power structure while decimating the entire biosphere in the process. Turning two blind eyes to this situation will not save us from the reality of the near-term impact we are facing. Here's the bottom line. There can be no legitimate discussion about the climate or the state of the climate without first and foremost including the climate engineering issue.
We do not have political representation for anybody being interested in saving this planet, and that is something I cannot understand.
There is an ever-increasing unhealthy cooperation between really all of the major media and the forces behind the scenes that are responsible for the environmental destruction.
So many people try to deny that these programs could be occurring because they claim if they were occurring, there would be people lining up to blow the whistle. And that is so utterly and totally false when we know that with modern day surveillance, every word that anybody of significance says is recorded somewhere by someone. And when we know what happens to whistleblowers like Julian Assange, why would anyone line up to put their own neck on the block to blow the whistle on these types of programs, knowing that it will at minimum destroy their life?
Even though half the pages were blanked out completely and others partially, the fact that they provided me this information and acknowledged, yes, they were aware, it's geoengineering, they were aware and they knew it was happening and they were monitoring and part of it in that respect. So it's happening, no doubt about it.
If these programs were in any sense benevolent, why would there be an illegal federal gag order right now on all National Weather Service and all NOAA employees, the nation's weathermen, an illegal federal gag order?
Well, that should tell you right away that all of this is happening at a really high level, obviously. So they won't take questions on it. They feed us BS information on what's going on. The people that are telling us what we ought to be doing are leading us astray. And there needs to be a comeuppance and a really good investigation of what's going on.
If you look at the total wealth that we can create on planet Earth, if we create a financial system which supports life and is in alignment with life, what I will tell you is our current financial wealth is less than 1% of what's possible. We don't have economic problems on planet Earth. We have a political problem. But the economy is so suboptimized, and that's because there is this force controlling it from top down. So whatever's going on, I say tell the people, because, you know, the people can deal with it, and the people can, whatever problem there is, they can deal with it or they can solve it. So I'm big on transparency. And I know if enough people push for enough transparency, we can figure it out.
Could a strange substance found by a Southwest Arkansas man be part of a government test? KSLA News 12 investigation reporter Jeff Farrell shows us the results of testing we had done about what's in our skies.
They begin as normal contrails from a jet engine, but do not fade away like a normal contrail. KSLA News 12 had the sample tested at a lab. The results? A high level of barium, 6.8 parts per million, more than 3 times the toxic level set by the EPA.
We're just about ready to go into the clean room facility. We will be looking at the samples by scanning electron microscopy. Scanning electron microscopy will provide information about particle size distribution. We will be able to get some elemental analysis. What really this technique is for is to prioritize our samples for downstream, more advanced imaging, more high-resolution imaging, especially by transmission electron microscopy. Put on a fresh pair of gloves. We're going to start with sample number 8. This is the blank that was collected on the return flight. No flow through this filter, so this filter should be free of any particulates. I'm going to use these scissors and forceps that have been cleansed with isopropanol and then acetone, and wipe free with these dust-free cloths. These are the series of samples that we're interested in. These are samples number 9, 10, and 11. These were taken on the return flight where the plane passed through an induced cloud layer. Number 10, I believe, is the one that was passed through a cloud layer at around somewhere between 17 and 19,000 feet. I will take time to cleanse the instruments between each sampling. Preparing sample number 9, near the center. Opening it to ensure that the surface that had received the particulates is facing upward. Number 9 is completed. Now processing sample number 10. One additional sample. This blank sample was taken after the plane landed and 3 of the samples containing actual airflow particulates had been collected. So we have one prior to the mission and one at the conclusion of the mission. Prior to imaging, these samples are coated with a thin layer of platinum. The platinum helps to take the excess charge or electrons and drain them off to the stub. And now we'll do the samples where we pass through the cloud layer.
A few little bright particles. This particle here is probably the one that we'll do the most analysis on.
So the general image that we're seeing now are the glass fibers from the glass fiber filter itself, and the bright particles or bright areas that we see are areas operating in the so-called backscatter mode of this microscope, collects electrons that are backscattered, especially from metal center compounds. But you can clearly see the lighter and darker contrasted areas there, suggesting that it's an aggregate.
Mm-hmm. Some of the smaller particles in here we're looking at on the order of about 450 nanometers long. But there's also smaller particles in there too. So backscattered electrons, typically the higher the atomic number, the brighter the signal. That being said, what we will do is look for the bright spots and then analyze those. The glass itself does seem to have sodium in it. Looks like aluminum, sodium, silicon, calcium, potassium. So the reason that caught my eye is because it's darker than everything else. And it's got lots of small particles in it.
Yep. And this gives us a lot of information. Again, it identifies which filters have qualitatively more materials, just, basically we see more material on it. It also gives us information about size of particles and potential for aggregates that we might be dealing with in the samples.
Barium sulfide again?
So barium sulfide is interesting. What he's doing now is just getting a high resolution image of it to see if this is indeed a single particle or if there's any evidence that there's an aggregate of smaller particles.
So really the big standout in this one seems to be iron. In this field we have one there, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
And I did analysis on all of them. They all seem to be pretty similar in composition.
Yeah.
Well, this is definitely made up of much smaller particles.
Yeah.
So this may be a clump of what you're looking for. We just analyzed 3 different areas. This particle seems to be high in aluminum. It's a large flake though. And this has some silver too.
Yeah, in terms of now the aluminum signatures that we're getting from the glass fibers themselves, this
is much bigger.
Much bigger.
So look at that.
Yeah, that's the aluminum piece.
It's easily 3x the silicon.
Yep.
And I think the silicon and aluminum are pretty similar in the glass.
Thoroughly
so here, if you look at just the glass fiber, silicon is significantly taller than aluminum. So that particle there is mostly aluminum.
Yeah.
So measuring this one right here, this is below 70 nanometers.
Right. Good. In the precipitation samples that we've seen in the past, the aluminum oxide particles that we've been seeing are the order of 40 to 60 nanometers. So that's consistent with the size that we've seen from precipitation events. Again, these samples were collected directly from the air.
There's not a lot of approaches or instrumentation that you can use to observe these nanomaterials. I mean, again, these are the sizes of viruses. And so really the only equipment or instrumentation that is appropriate for identifying these materials is high-resolution transmission electron microscopy. This allows us not only to determine the size of the particles, we can also determine the composition using a technique called elemental dispersive spectroscopy. It's done within this large microscope. So it will give us information about the morphology of the particles, the composition of the particles, and we can actually see the crystalline spacing, so the spaces of the crystals themselves. So we are talking high resolution microscopic techniques that are really the only way to be able to observe these directly. Morphology is important because the productions of these materials are really of a constrained size range, and we've seen this already in samples that we've analyzed from other sources. American Element produces lots of these nanomaterials, and you can actually purchase them online. The size distribution of these engineered particles are quite homogeneous.
What we get? Ooh, it's like there's aluminum. Aluminum.
Now what I've done is tell it to calibrate to the aluminum peak. So now what it's doing is going through each of its process times and each of its gain values and calibrating.
Oh man.
I can tell you this much. What I'm seeing right now is far superior to the last time I ran that calibration. So you see you got two calciums, right?
Yeah.
All right. K alpha, K beta. All right. This barium peak is probably an L or an M. Here's your major barium.
Yeah, and then you have the other to confirm there.
Correct. Barium is a triple quadruple.
It's definitely
yeah. Oh yeah.
The significance of the results is that, to my knowledge, this is the first evidence of nanomaterials collected directly from the emissions of aircrafts. This is the first time that this has been reported or acknowledged.
There is aluminum and there is aluminum. So the way the people are involved in the destruction of our beautiful planet, they get away with it is because the crust of the Earth consists of aluminum silicate.
Although traces of aluminum may be found in almost any soil, only those clays containing 50 or 60% aluminum ore and known as bauxite are mined for commercial production.
And so their argument is always, well, we always had aluminum in the system and our body knows how to deal with it. Well, there is a difference between creating nanoparticles of aluminum which do not exist in nature, which is a highly aggressive material that is seeking to chemically react with other things.
The chemical process reaches its climax in these huge tanks, where alumina is precipitated out of the ore in caustic solution. Later, the water content is driven off by baking in giant rotary kilns, resulting in this pure snow-white powder known as alumina. An ever-increasing amount of this alumina is being used in chemical processing, in soil conditioners, in abrasives, and many other applications.
Aluminum particles are highly reflective and thus serve the stated agendas of the climate engineers, reducing direct sunlight. The nanoparticles of aluminum are also powerful desiccants, absorbing atmospheric moisture, reducing atmospheric relative humidity, derailing and disrupting the entire global hydrological cycle.
Nanoparticulates of different materials are produced for lots of different reasons. In fact, they're in cosmetics, titanium oxide nanoparticles used for sunscreen, zinc oxide.
So they're not a new invention. What has happened recently, and again, my knowledge is primarily the medical and health effects studies, is that we've learned to manipulate and create nanoparticles for specific design purposes.
We have exploding amount of national laboratory facilities which are researching just the nanomaterials. And it's scary because every single one of them, first of all, is toxic to human body. And second, it absorbs the gigahertz range radiation. Every single nanoparticle absorbs gigahertz radiation. Nanoparticle has nothing to do with the original material where it stems from. So aluminum in nanoform, you can literally explode it. It can be ignited at much, much lower temperature.
In this form, another unusual property of aluminum appears. Suspended in a paint vehicle, the powdered particles float to the surface and form a continuous layer of aluminum over the area being covered. This aluminum shield provides protection from weather and reflects light and heat almost as effectively as a solid sheet of aluminum.
Aluminum is one of the two metals, iron and aluminum, that exist in a 3+ state. Each plus means lacking an electron. And so aluminum salts are the most electron deficient metal, and with that highly, highly reactive to the proteins inside our cells, which are loaded with electrons. And so aluminum makes very, very strong bonds with the proteins in our cell, which means a protein that has incorporated aluminum becomes a dysfunctional protein that no longer works. We have about 200,000 working proteins in the body. That's what creates your testosterone. That's what creates your insulin. Yeah, this is all made by intracellular proteins. And those get contaminated with the aluminum and become highly dysfunctional.
No creature has ever been found to utilize aluminum. There is no creature, no virus, no bacteria, no fungus, nothing that thrives on aluminum. It's deadly to all life on Earth.
In national defense, as in many other fields, aluminum is everywhere. In the air, on the ground, and on the sea, versatile aluminum serves our fighting men.
And this is the thing about the constituents used in geoengineering, is they are similar to items that are going in ground operations. So whether you're sanding aircraft parts that contain strontium chromate, changing brake pads, working around barium, bending aluminum metals for different aircraft parts, this could all be explained as to their exposures. But the question is, those that don't work in those areas that are showing these symptoms, where's it coming from?
I think in the next couple of hours, we'll see that actually open up a bit before the clouds start to return a bit. That's the high cloudiness we're being sprayed up from the north. There's more upstream, though, for us later on this afternoon into this evening.
That we've been dealing a lot with some military activity in terms of chaff anyway, and that's something that I experienced for the first time yesterday. That was a whole lot of fun. And that's where the military just basically dumps some of the tiny particles of plastic or metal mylar into the atmosphere.
And when you see this kind of a pattern like this, you can rest assured there's something going on. They're actually little bitty magnetic and little bitty strips of, whether it's aluminum.
Then you see these bands of very distinct cloud cover moving into the region. That is not rain, that is not snow. Believe it or not, military aircraft flying through the region is dropping chaff. Small bits of aluminum, sometimes it's made of plastic or even metallicized paper products, but it's used as an anti-radar issue, and obviously they're up there practicing. Now, they won't confirm that, but I was in the Marine Corps for many years, and I'll tell you right now, that's what it is.
So we conducted the analyses of these nanomaterials and conclusively confirmed that there were aluminum oxide, barium sulfate nanoparticles in the samples that we took on the East Coast on that second flight. For my mind, that would be sufficient, but I'm also was quite interested in, well, what's going on the West Coast? Are these similar types of results can be collected in various regions? I was really thankful to be part of a third sampling mission. We flew from near San Diego up to the Bay Area and back on one of these days where, again, there was clear evidence of patterned skies being induced by the emissions of aircrafts. In this sampling mission, there was a couple of different things. One is that we used a Learjet. It's a pressurized cabin, for one thing. We can get to higher altitudes. It's much quicker. And we used instrumentation that was appropriate for smaller particulates. We had instruments to monitor the air quality in real time. We had 2 particle meters on board, one that measured PM 2.5, so that would be relatively large particles that we're normally concerned about, these respirable particles that get into our lungs. But we also had on board a particle meter that went down to 20 nanometers. So that meter, combined with the larger particle meter, gave us a full assessment of materials ranging from 20 nanometers up to 2.5 microns. Our filters that we use were 0.1 micron, so that's 100 nanometer pore size. That would capture many more of the nanomaterials that were being released. What we're breathing in pressurized cabins is actually air from the outside. It's being taken in front of the engines. Some of the airstream goes into the engine to feed the combustion process, and then bleed air then off of that is taken directly from the outside, pressurized, and then is used to pressurize the cabin. And we could sample it right from the vents. So we had a sampling wand that we could hold up to the vent, and the sampling wand was sampling for the ultrafine particles. We sampled through one of these confluent layers. And as we passed through that layer, the larger particle meter basically read just ambient air within the cabin. With regard to the nanoparticle meter, there was clear evidence that there were smaller particles at significant numbers present within that layer. And that is significant. I mean, this is not only just the number of particles that we observed, but also that they were confined to that smaller size range. Above the layer, again, the air quality was quite good. Below the layer, air quality was quite good with regard to the smaller nanoparticle meters. But within that layer, there was clear evidence that there were smaller particles at significant numbers present within that layer. It has significance because this emerging condition known as aerotoxic syndrome, where airline attendants, pilots, people are becoming allergic to their own aircrafts. There really hasn't been identified any known cause of this phenomenon, but nanoparticles of that type can cause things like allergic reactions, these same symptoms that are being experienced by all of these people in the airline industry now. The data that we collected using the particle meter is already convincing in terms of there are nanoparticles that are present within that induced layer. What is needed now is a larger contribution from a broader community of scientists, health workers. However, that takes time. And in my opinion, we don't have that kind of time. These materials will reside in our children for their entire life, however long or short that might be. So we don't really have time to say, oh, more research is needed, although it is needed, but not at the same time as we continue to disperse these materials and affect our human population.
You know, we have the confirmation here through all this science, scientific evidence, etc. With the chemtrails, the COVID virus, and all these people coming out, the whistleblowers, the scientists, the researchers. I mean, we have confirmation that this is going on. If you don't know it by now, you know, you don't want to know it, basically. It's a matter of you don't want to know it. You don't want to know what's going on. But, okay, so we know what's going on, so what are we going to do about it? That's where we come in. I'm going to be, when we get the funding, I'm going to be going up to Northern California to talk with Dane, if I can get his attention, Deborah Tavares, and interview some of these people that are bringing this information out and seeing if they want to go further, because again, they're just rehashing what's going on, which is good. First, we want to see what's going on, but we want to also take it a step further. What can we do about it? You know, Dane is very sincere, it seems like, and he's putting this documentary out, a lot of information. He has this research lab that he's invested a lot of money in. He has a good team of researchers. But basically every week he has a news show. He's rehashing what's going on for 20 years, but what can we do about it? Again, that's where our awareness comes in. Through awareness, which is really the only cure, we can go further. We can do something about it. And it's up to you how you do that. But if you get beyond your literal one-dimensional idea of things and how you've been indoctrinated and schooled, then you can begin to your process to become more aware and really do something of a benefit for the planet or for whatever your contribution will be. And in this case, yeah, the planet is important here. We want to take care of the planet because this is our home in the physical, at least, and we can do a lot better. We don't have to destroy the environment and agree to those who are doing it. So again, my plans are in the future to, when we get the funding, to go out and interview these people and seeing if they want to go further than what they're doing now. And that's a big step for a lot of people. That's why we're doing these shows, not just to inform people, because what we're talking about here, everybody's doing it basically, all the whistleblower people, David Icke and everybody, Max Egan. I mean, the information's out there, like I say. It's take it or leave it. Most people are leaving it. And a lot of people are at the same time waking up to it, but they don't know what to do. So you've got the information, so what do they do about it? It's so huge that the process of demise here that we're in, that most people are clueless what to do. Well, the answer lies in your real awareness, your awareness. So that's what we're giving hints to and references to, your real awareness, and how you can utilize that to wake up and increase your survivability. on this level and other levels. So I'll open it up to you before we go on, Kevin and Ronald, if you want to comment on the documentary.
Yeah. You know you're getting at them when they attack you. That's like when they flew over my house and did a nice tight curve about 3,000 feet. See, they stay above 2,500 feet because if they're below that, then your local airports have control of them. So as long as they stay above 2,500 feet, then they, like in my area, Oakland is where they communicate with. So I had this plane fly over, and I happened to be outside when it did it. I was watching it, and he was coming in about 3,000 feet, and he was doing the full spray, and he did a complete tight turn over my house. So I know I was doing something, getting at somebody, because I would keep calling my representatives and keep bitching at them about this stuff. And so I knew I was getting somewhere. So this thing is top down. This is coming from the very top. And that's why you're not seeing anything done. The guys that's supposed to be governing this stuff, they're all tight-mouthed because they're paid to be tight-mouthed. I don't know how you're going to get around that mess. And also that this aluminum is used in the diesel fuel on these planes to accelerate the burn. So that's why your forest is burning down. They accelerate the burn.
The source and writer of the following information I have unfortunately misplaced, but including in this article was also an interview with Deborah Tavares. What I find horrific is the enormity of the PSYOP, she says. This is a mind-controlled, trauma-based, destructive campaign. Officials are telling everyone that climate change is the cause of the California fires. Tavares says that in reality, it's an aggressive rollout of UN Agenda 2030, aka the Green New Deal, to move populations out of the wildland-urban interface areas and to ban the future sale of passenger vehicles powered by fossil fuels. It may not be too difficult, as homeowners find that no one will insure homes in these areas. The Wildlands Network is the biodiversity treaty mandated by the United Nations. As I said, it is a climate action plan controlling all people, prosperity, restrictions, regulations implementing fines, penalties, conservation segments, and to reduce CO2 emissions, or aka greenhouse gas emissions here in Sonoma County 25% below 1990 levels. What is occurring is a restriction of all resource consumption above what is needed to supply vital human needs. And that restriction is saying anything above vital human needs is immoral, and that the human population must be reduced. So much of what Tavares says here is shocking, but it is backed by UN and other government agency documents. About a dozen countries and about 20 cities around the world, including Los Angeles, have pledged to ban cars powered by gasoline and diesel within the next 5 to 10 years in favor of electric powered cars. In other words, the utilities are taking over all fuel, all transportation fuels, eliminating diesel and petrol and what they call fossil fuel, which we know never came from dead dinosaurs. It's transitioning to only electric, hence the reason for the global deployment of smart meters. Our utilities are going to control all fuel for all US electric vehicles, as I've just said, including the requirement for trucks and all commercial vehicles to transition into electric. So we have that as an enormous component of what is occurring right now, being approved at the California Public Utility Commission, that is a Rothschild organized commission as well. Whatever the name of your utility company is, wherever you are, this is a global occupation, a takeover of your utilities and centralizing it to electricity only. They say that we need to replace all those forms of energy with wind and solar, which I think currently accounts for less than 10%, I think, of our current forms of energy. How by 2030 are wind and solar going to replace all those other forms of energy? They're not. The answer is they're not. The statements Tavares makes, which are less easy to substantiate, involve weaponized weather and the use of directed energy weapons to start these fires. Although such technologies do exist, could it really be that they are being used against innocent civilians? Host Sean thinks so. I think this is a breakaway deep state. I think that there's a deep state government that has seized control, and if you're being chemtrailed heavily and you're being subject to directed energy weapon systems in California, I think there's a deep state secondary government, a hidden shadow government responsible for that usurps the current form of government. There are so many more details covered here. Scenes of vaporized homes surrounded by relatively unscathed trees are the hallmark of the devastating North California fires we saw last fall and again in the Carr fire. We're seeing the same eerie images of this anomaly, where upscale suburban homes are cremated, innumerable cars are toasted, requiring temperatures exceeding 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, yet nearby trees, just inches away, are left intact. It is disturbing to relate reports from people in the region who have lost everything and who are convinced that directed energy weapons are being deployed against their communities. One rumor circulating claims it is the state of California that is the perpetrator. The chronically insolvent state, having defied the federal government with its sanctuary city laws that shelter illegal immigrants, is being blamed for torching the Redding-Shasta region so that the state could get access to state of emergency and FEMA funds. I'm not here to argue whether or not any of this is true, but I do find it significant that so many Americans have so entirely lost faith in the authorities that they believe their homes have been targeted for destruction. This idea is unfathomable, yet the images give the appearance of illustrating these beliefs. And frankly, after 9/11, decades of wars based on lies, the sheer number of mass shootings and cover-ups, and that Mandalay Bay is actually suing 1,000+ shooting victims, one would have to be an idiot to trust the authorities. Last year, YouTuber PlainTruth.info posted 3 instances of large laser beams captured by cell phone cameras around the wildfires, and In Truth by Grace posted a video featuring scientific papers about the use of electrical fields for combustion synthesis in metals, aka smart fire technology. The latter explains how these fires were being set by masers, the acronym for microwave amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. When the coherent radiation of atomic beam masers are applied to metals, the released oxides function as accelerants for the creation of fires. This can be done with all kinds of metals, due to the characteristics of their atomic structure, which is why you shouldn't put metals in a microwave oven. Masers would help explain the toasted cars. She goes on to explain that most homes in California have terracotta roof tiles, commonly made from clay, that gets its red color from iron oxide. When microwaves are applied to terracotta, the iron oxide releases oxygen, which fuels the fires. Significantly, the same cannot be done with trees, because there's no metal in trees to create the oxidizing agent to stoke a fire. There certainly appears to be something amiss in the scenes of destruction in Santa Rosa and other locations in California. The burn patterns of the California fires are not normal. Highly flammable pine trees and ornamental grasses have endured where brick, cement, metal and glass have completely disappeared. The melting burning point of common household materials like glass, 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit, and stainless steel, 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit, are double the temperature of house and forest fires, which are 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit. The toasted cars and other signature oddities, like massive steel I-beams twisted and melted from a mysterious heat source, intermixed with piles of unscorched paper at the site of the World Trade Center on 9/11, are familiar to readers of the work of Dr. Judy Wood, a mechanical and materials engineering scientist and the author of Where Did the Towers Go? Dr. Wood suggests that the bizarre devastation seen in Lower Manhattan and the World Trade Center complex were the work of newfangled directed energy weapons, and this is what some people are suspecting attacked California.
Yeah, I agree with him. Everything sounds about correct. Like I said, if you put metal and the temperatures that they're talking about, like 2,800 degrees versus 1,000 degrees, yeah, where'd all that heat come from? Had to come from direct energy transmission. So, yeah, this thing is big, and it's like I say, it's coming from the top down, and that's why these guys are all tight mouth, not saying anything. We got a problem, but I don't know how to solve it.
Yeah, and then they're pushing this. They're trying to snow job people with climate change, and then we have to reduce our energy consumption, food consumption, whatever. Our resources are being depleted, so we have to reduce, cut back. This is all just again a snow job, keep us distracted. I was listening to Mike Adams interview the resistance chicks, two women in Cincinnati who have they're homesteaders, and they talked about how they're growing their own food. They have chickens. They're involved with the community farmers markets. So everybody supports each other. They're doing fine, you know. So this can spread all over the world. I mean, people can do this, and there'll be enough for everybody, really. But they're not marketing that. They're marketing lack of resources, depletion of resources. But in the meantime, while these people that are homesteading and doing self-sufficient communities, they're fighting back and, you know, doing what they can, but they're still not seeing what's going on, because the 5G and these directed energy weapons could just wipe them out too in an instant. So they're kind of, they're in their own la-la land, what they're doing. So we're also proposing self-sufficient communities, but with people that are aware of what's going on. It's the bigger picture. It's not just growing your own food, you know, and having your own eggs, but really like establishing your own position beyond just the self-sufficient communities, really going into the multidimensional aspect of what's going on, because just if you just have the physical, you're not going to make it. There's so much more going on with the controllers because they are multidimensional. They see it a lot. They see further and more expansive than what most people see it as. But of course, they've been marketed and indoctrinated and is just seeing a very tiny fraction of what's going on. So it looks good, these communities, etc. But there's just so much more to be done.
That's the advantage of compartmentalizing. Each compartment doesn't know what the other compartment's doing. That's how they keep their secrets working for them. They got everything going for them.
Yeah, they have it all set up. They see what works with their social engineering. They've had they're at it all the time, 24/7, with their controls and their tyranny.
I just want to know where's the big guys at? Where's our guys? What are they doing? We can't do this by ourselves. We need help from our guides and we need the silent ones. We need them to step forward and start slapping some faces. We need some help.
They can, but they're helping us become stronger, Ron, by having us and face the challenges, so we become more creative and stronger. If they could just do that, they could come in and do whatever, but what's that going to do? We'll just be who we are without the awareness that we could have from facing these challenges and becoming more so.
Well, we need an upper edge that at least once in a while we need somebody to step forward and give us a little hand so we can help get ourselves out of this mess.
Yeah,
because ultimately, we're responsible for it. We let them do it, and of course, we blame our forefathers and our grandfathers and our grandmothers, for why we're in this problem. But they were just as ignorant as everybody else when they were doing this stuff. They didn't know what was going on. They weren't that educated. So I don't know, guys. Where to go from here, I don't know.
Kevin has something.
Well, when you were saying how the true silent ones and the guides, when are they going to step in and do something? Well, as I have been revealing on recent real side experiences, there's a huge overhaul of the overall consciousness taking place at the moment, because there are certain circumstances where a consciousness, an overall consciousness that all consciousness is a part of, becomes to such a degree of distortion and based on such an extent of restriction and control agreement that if it reaches a certain level of that, it seems the situation or the stage is just right, where the ears can directly intervene into what would be really everybody's free will, decision and agreement to experience all the restriction and control that is in the consciousness. Because if it's in the consciousness, if it is in everybody's consciousness, which it is, it can't be there unless each individual agreed to place it there. And even though the agreements were gleaned through rather underhanded, sneaky marketing techniques, nevertheless, it is still agreement. It is still a consciousness that can't be constructed as it is unless all involved, all individual consciousness units, agreed that it was there. And so effectively that is there, everybody's free will decision to experience a restricted and controlled overall simulated arena, and however that plays out in their individual lives. But as I said, there are situations where, because everything equals itself and everything eventually meets the effects of itself, there are situations where the effects can be managed in certain ways rather than just let it play out as it would, because obviously a consciousness as restricted and distorted as it currently is now, for it to play out as it would to meet the effects of itself, that would basically be the simulator imploding, and taking every individual still embroiled in creation, still in agreement with the consciousness which restricts them to creation. It would involve all those individuals imploding with their own consciousness, which will then, if they haven't recognized is that point, they will then carry on in another simulator, in wherever that may be or position. But as I said there, rather than just let the effects play out and the consciousness implode upon itself, the effects can be managed in certain ways. It's very hard to understand exactly at what point that is, because the is doesn't really decide as such. It just always is an expression of its nature, which is its self-survival and its endless want to recognize the endlessness of itself. And so this always expresses, I mean, the expression of that basically brought forth the simulators in the first place. And it wasn't really a decision per se, as we would understand it, more just an expression of this endless primary objective of the is, which is always self-recognition and survival. And this not only gave birth to the simulators and brought about all these creational situations in which then parts of it could then recognize it, which then translates as a greater recognition of itself, but also that when situations are just so, automatically will then, almost like agents of itself, these light beings and such, be deployed and be able to then manipulate the consciousness in creative and beneficial altering ways, which then can, obviously you change the consciousness, you then change the experience that affects from it. And as I said, it's very hard to define exactly when this is, but there's a certain crucial points where everything becomes just so, where the is will automatically do this, as the is always automatically is according to its nature, which is an automatic expression of what the is basically is, which, as I said, is about itself and its real survival. And as such, then it seems this simulator, the consciousness, has reached a certain point, a certain way or level of distortion, in which the is automatically in a constant expression of its nature, is able to now, what would seem on the surface to be violating free will, it's altering the overall consciousness and basically destructuring it in various ways. And it's also, as I said, I had real side experiences which revealed this, which showed that what seemed to be the true silent ones converging on a representation of the overall consciousness of control, and dismantling and removing and altering and making adjustments, teasing out all the control agreement aspects, even though it's free will agreement through all individuals involved that they are there. And so it'll be interesting to see how this translates through into a simulated experience for all. But these things are going on, as I said, at the moment on the real side. And there's a lot of shaking up and rearranging of the simulator going on through alterations in the overall consciousness. And also there were situations in real side experiences I shared previous to that, where it seems as though alternative simulators are also being brought into being, where as another opportunity being afforded for individuals on their awareness process, where they can, if they can, completely disassociate and detach agreement from the current consciousness, they can almost switch into an alternative simulator as a possibility, and then perhaps alternate between the two as almost like a safe haven as an alternative simulator, and then pop into the current simulator. But in order to continue presenting the is and providing everyone with the opportunity to wake up and recognize the is and become more aware, but they're not then resigned to this current simulator, which very likely will possibly still go through its demise and deteriorating cycle to implosion based on the consciousness. But nevertheless, there was a lot of effort going on the real side through with all the guides, with Dane, and as I said, the true silent ones. And so there's a lot more going on than what we can see on the surface. And so, yeah, I'll just add that, I guess. Yeah.
Very good, Kevin. Okay, We're at the
Well, it
end.
would be very nice if they tell us what they're doing, that at least we know that we're getting help, even though if you're not conscious of it. It would be nice that know that they're at least we got some help coming at us. We
Well,
sure the hell can't do this on our own.
Listen to Kevin, new Kevin Smith, the Great Witness shows. He's got a lot of information there. He brings through. So thanks for being here. World Forest Report. See you next week. NUUU. Ronald?
NUUU.
Kevin?
You.